In the distant future, vampires rule the night, but their numbers are dwindling. One podcast is unlike all the others. Half human, half vampire. This is Lefty Speaks, the official podcast for Vampire Hunter D.
By just the response to that.
But we finished the project. We got the footage back and we went into post-production, and then we hit another snag, which was someone that we had initially brought on to do the VFX for this project, all the compositing, as well as some of the particle effects that we needed to kind of sell this paperweight as our transporting vehicle. They bailed. And so we were like, okay, what do? We are stuck. We can't find anyone else. And I was like, guys, I'm going to teach myself After Effects. Let's go. And so everybody chipped in a couple bucks. I bought Trapcode Particular, which is a plugin for After Effects. I got a subscription and I taught myself more detailed compositing and particle effects, which, I had a little bit experience in from school, but I was like, you know what, if I'm going to be editing, I'm going to teach myself this anyway. And so for the next 2 months, it was Sonja and I almost every day during our summer break, coming over, and she would just bring a bottle of champagne. Not every day. Sometimes it was lemonade. And she would bring a bottle of champagne, and she'd be like boozy edit hour, and we would sit there, and you can see it in our behind the scenes. It's just me with 2 notebooks of what had to be done compositing wise, what had to be done lighting wise, what, if the sky had to be replaced and turned into red, that's what we were doing today. Or we just went check by check by check. A lot of shots. Sonja was very adamant that the horses, if we were going to have horses, that they have a mechanical eye. And I was like, babe, I don't know how to do that. I'll turn its eye glassy red. We'll do that. And so we, just going down that checklist of things we need to do. Also, one of the challenges of this shoot is that Sonja, and I'm going to out her here, is 5'2", maybe 5'2", 5'1", and D is this tall, statuesque. And so many of our scenes, we had to pull what I call Lord of the Rings Gimli, where we just either had to shoot very far back to give the illusion that Sonja was this towering, beautiful figure. Well, Sonja's beautiful. We don't have to sell that. But that she was this towering figure. Or we had to put her on a box. So there was often an apple box put in some green fabric, and so there was some compositing with that as well. Yeah. A lot of sneaky VFX in this project, not just particles, but also just some interesting compositing. And I learned so much just by doing that. And the post-production side of it was just a blast. And putting it all together.
So on that note, if anybody has seen The Boys versus the comic, Homelander is, their version of evil Superman. Tall, buff, all that. Look up the behind the scenes pictures of Anthony Starr, the guy who plays Homelander. Because he is also on the lower end of the 5-foot scale. So he wears these pink platform high heel boots.
Wow.
While in the Homelander costume, because they're like, okay, we need to make you taller. What do you want? And I think he said it as a joke. I remember him seeing an interview about him saying that, he wanted something ridiculous for his footwear to make him taller for the role. And so there's behind the scenes pictures around of him with legs out off to the side in his chair with these giant platform high heel shoes.
Yeah.
Yep. So just a lot of standing on boxes, or if we didn't have a box or anything at the time, Smidge would have to kneel down.
There was a lot of crouching.
So we would, film from, waist up at least. I think the snow one, we dug a hole.
We dug into the snow to kind of give the illusion, and I stepped pretty far back to get the wide.
Because we had that back-to-back shot where it kind of rotates and you can see Dee is so much taller in that moment, but we had dug a hole in the snow and she was kneeling down. And so that was another, I mean, just one of many of the challenges that we kind of overcame, and didn't understand that we were going to have to come to those crossroads when we initially started this, you know.
Or that, you know, oh, we want a scene where Smidge, who also played the image of
Dee's mother.
Mm-hmm. We wanted kind of a dream sequence with that. And we were like, oh, we kind of want her out in the water very mysteriously. And we're like, oh, we're going to have to get in the water. Everybody get swimsuits. We're showing up to Arrow Rock, 6 a.m. Arrow Rock in the middle of the summer with a can of fog spray and just shh. Okay. Sun's setting it right. And then Eric holding a reflector to get that beautiful, gorgeous light to bounce up on her. And we're all just surrounded her in the water. Like, just things like that you say, like, this is the shot we want. And then when you go to construct that shot, you're like, oh, this is a whole different beast. And that's something, the problem solving aspect of it, I think is something that we really enjoy.
Yeah, and learned a lot from, you know, just with filmmaking and consistency and trying to keep so many pieces together in a cohesive storyline. A lot of learning went into this project. And, you know, looking back, you know, this many years later, it's kind of fun to rewatch it. I rewatched it this morning, and, you know, there's still that sense of pride. Definitely. But there's a lot of things, you know, you pick up after so many years of experience where we're just like, oh my gosh, what were we doing there? Oh my gosh, you know, for this
Why
scene,
is there 17 cuts in 2 seconds? I'm just calling myself, I'm a better editor now. And like, since this project, like, we look back on it with such fondness. And not just in a way that's like, oh, we did a cool thing, but look at the artists we were. And what we gave to it in that moment. And I've told Sonja that this project, like, looking back on it, I still watch it and I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have cut there, or, oh, we definitely should have shot this differently, you know. But I look back on it and I'm like, those kids went so hard. It was them getting up at 4 a.m. With nothing but Starbucks and a dream, and running up and down dunes, or jumping into the lake at Arrowhead, or digging ourselves out of the snow or out of the rain and the thunder, to live a dream and make a dream. And so as much as I like look back on this project and I'm like, oh, more money could have been put into this. Like, we're better producers now. You know, we could have done more for this project. I look back on it with such fondness because it's such a moment of time of like passion and verve and being our own army, our own army of me, you know, just.
And then not even knowing how far it would go. I know Mandy and I were discussing, you know, like, okay, well, we're going to put it on the internet. You know, what if people hate it? You know, I know there's going to be these criticisms because I am clearly a girl. And I knew that was going to be something that, you know, as culture is on the internet, they're like, oh, why is Dee a girl? And it's like, well, it's just what we had at the time. And, you know, I was the only person with a costume. So that's what we went with. But I remember her saying, she's like, I just kind of want people to see it. And if Kikuchi sees it and just like likes it on Facebook, I'll be set for life. And I remember,
I don't even think I said that. I was like, if our moms see it and say, good job, honey.
Yeah.
And like the boys, I think for me, the Boise cosplay community who had rallied behind us and who had not just donated their time to this project, but ultimately, when we crowdfunded the hard drive, I wanted them to know that we finished this and we did this for you guys. And this is for you guys. Like, this is for our small town and the things that we can make together. Yeah. We didn't expect anything more than that.
We didn't, you know, and I had a little bit of a dream because I am already such a huge fan of the series. You know, for me as an artist who was already so into Vampire Hunter D, I was just like, God, it would just be so cool if that community just could see what we did and maybe, you know, like any artist, just appreciate the art. And I specifically remember Mandy texting me on my way home from a road trip.
So we premiered it.
Yeah, we premiered it
September of 2019.
Yes.
2019.
2019.
Yeah. And I put it on YouTube, and the Boise cosplay community was so stoked.
Oh, they were
We
great.
had sent it to the Vampire Hunter D Facebook group. They were so stoked.
Very
and
sweet.
we were just over the moon. And then I got a YouTube comment, and Sonja was out of town.
Yeah, I was driving home.
Sonja was out of town, and I got a YouTube comment, and it was like, "Hi, my name's Kevin Leahy. Thank you so much for for making this fan film. I showed it to Kikuchi-san, and he said it's very well made. We showed it at an event, and congratulations." And I was like, "What?" Because I wasn't as familiar. So I texted Sonja, and I said, "Sonja, who's Kevin Leahy?" And anyway.
Yeah, I pulled over to the next rest stop so I could actually read the text. And I was just like, I just called her immediately. I was like, Mandy, like, where's this comment? I need to see this comment. And sure enough, it was authentic. And it was just, I think, one of the best feelings, I think, as an artist I've ever had.
And then that evening, I actually got reached out on Twitter by some Japanese fans who had taken photos at the event that Kevin was talking about. And there was Kikuchi-san. And I was like, I'm sorry. And then Sonja's image right behind him. And I lost my mind. And Sonja came back to Boise, and I'll never forget. Sonja's like, "Are you doing anything right now?" And I was like, "No, why?" And I opened the door, and she just had a bouquet of flowers for me. She was like, "We did it.
Yeah.
We did it."
Yeah. So it was, it was such a lovely adventure, just starting something really small with a small idea, and the learning and the growing process, and working with the community building, bringing on friends, and having the support of family, and just being able to create a project that, even moving forward, still, opens up conversations and hopefully inspires other people to go out there and go do the thing. It might be really hard, and we had no idea what we were doing. And we just hope it inspires people in the cosplay community, or in just the artistic community in general, whether it's film, TV, you're writing scripts. You don't have to know what you're doing right away to just dive in and just give it your best. And I think that's what made this whole thing so cool, is we just didn't know what we were doing. We did our best with the resources that we had at the time, and the really good friend group, and the support that we had, not only from close friends, but even strangers on the internet. And their input was just mind-blowing. And I think we met some people at a convention, like, not too long after we
Was it SakuraCon?
I think it was SakuraCon. I think no, I wasn't in D that year, but I did see a D cosplayer, and I was like, oh my goodness, it's a Vampire Hunter D cosplayer. So I went up to them, and I was like, oh my gosh, I love your costume. And they low-key recognized us. They're like, were you the D cosplayer from that thing? And I was like, you saw it? And she's like, yeah, I actually made a costume. This is one of my first cosplays, because I saw your film, and I decided I wanted to cosplay Vampire Hunter D. And my mind was blown. That was just, somebody had seen the film and was inspired to do their own version of Vampire Hunter D. And that added, just another person into that community, just kind of brought them into what we just kind of helped create, I guess. It was a good feeling, and it was really lovely to meet them, and yeah, kind of neat.
I love what you said, to tie back to something much earlier about how you were worried about making sure that you weren't getting into any legal trouble on the copyright side.
Right.
And that's something that I think it's easily forgotten, but is important. I love seeing fan film. I love seeing, that creative content, but there's that line I think we do need to be cognizant of and being respectful. I remember This was a number of years ago, and I saw this group start posting around the internet. They were a group of actors from the Midwest who had decided that they were going to do a live action Vampire Hunter D feature film, but commercially. And so they've made a website. They're fielding questions. They're like, we're announcing this person is D and this woman is Doris, and all this with headshots and descriptions. And we're like, wait a minute. I know who has the rights to live action. I know who has the rights to the books. I know who has the rights to animation, because I've got the animation rights. We're doing comics. At the time, Neal was working at Davis Film, the people with the rights to the live action version of it. And so we're all scratching our heads, and I call him up. I'm like, hey, have you seen this? And so without saying who we were, I'm asking in just forum, do you have the rights to do this? How are you? Oh, we don't have the rights. We're just putting a package together. We're raising money so that we can go to Sony with our presentation and ask Sony to get the rights for us to do it. I just buried my face in my hands. I'm like, are you... What?
Yeah, I had to deal with that a lot. Yeah, because we also had to do the same thing with Resident Evil and Silent Hill. People would just decide they can make a movie, and it is a delicate balance, right, between fan made projects, and I mean, obviously, like we with Resident Evil, when there was so much time between one movie and another movie, or like with Silent Hill, there was a long time between Silent Hill 1 and Silent Hill 2. So there's that love-hate relationship where we love the intellectual property, the love for the property, the stories, and people wanting to, as fans, create with it, play in that sandbox, and keep that IP alive and awareness. But then there's also that professional level, and there are times where there can be where lines can get crossed. I was part of the Prelude to Axanar team, so a bunch of us had been involved with fan projects of Star Trek, a bunch of different projects, and we ended up getting together and all many of us going, okay, why don't we take it a step up? Why don't we make something just truly that looks just as good as a feature film? And we did that, and we seem to have gotten kind of a nod of approval by the IP owners, and then unfortunately a few of the folks started crossing that line, and we ended up raising a lot of money to make a project, but again, lines were crossed, so I had to step away, other people had to step away, and ultimately the project died. And it's just unfortunate, because if lines hadn't been crossed, that would have been a really fantastic project. But when you cross those lines, and a lot of it is communication. If I mean, right now, both Star Wars and Star Trek have established very clear guidelines for fan-made projects, but there's a lot of IP that I mean, I don't think we for Silent Hill or Resident Evil ever put out any kind of official guidelines, because again, you want to be careful. If you put out the guidelines, then you have to enforce them, and that costs time and money and effort. But if you don't make it clear, then you're not giving the fan base direction or approval. So it's then everyone's kind of just trial by error. But again, like Scott said, it was really wonderful that you guys already thought about that, and we're putting that as a point of consideration while you were making it, because a lot of people don't, as Scott illustrated.
Yeah. we knew that
Mm-hmm.
we weren't going to show this at film festivals or anything like that. This was for our, we weren't going to monetize it. Nothing of that nature. We understand that the IP is the IP, and this is just a sandbox, and we're playing in that, and we respect that as a fan creation.
Right. Well, and I remember too, we had some correspondence with you, Scott, too.
Yep.
I think over Instagram or something. You had kind of early on when we posted a small clip. We're like, hey, this is awesome, but just be careful, X, Y, and Z. And we were grateful for that because we already had those thoughts in mind. We didn't originally think it was going to be a bigger thing. So we wanted to continue to work with you, and you kind of helped us along the way to make sure we weren't overstepping our boundaries, which was really helpful and was just another reason why I fell so much in love with this niche community of Vampire Hunter D, because it's that balance of trying to get more people into something that is really, really niche and supporting fan created content, but also understanding that, Mandy and I have zero rights to any of the intellectual property. We're just fans. Mm-hmm. And kind of keeping it there.
Yeah. And I think that's something that is a wonderful thing about community building is I've seen, when I went to one of the live talk parties that Kikuchi-san hosts in Tokyo. And so every year, I guess there's a costume theme and a bunch of people show up in costume. So I had posted some pictures of me with Kevin, and he's got, the spider familiar, I think it was Granny Viper that year.
Mm-hmm.
So he does, there's a number of them that do different costumes every year as part of this event. And to me, that's part of the fun, is that fan expression. And that's something that I always want to be able to support, because I know it's something I personally enjoy in, things that I'm just there as a fan. Like I love, I still to this day will play Final Fantasy video games. So at different conventions and events, I love going to the Final Fantasy meetups, and just they're fun events, and you get to meet a bunch of other people that fell in love with the different video games. And for the people that are for the ones that you like the least, you can kind of rub them like, that one wasn't as good as 6.
Right.
And it's just part of the fun of it to me. And mm-hmm. I think it's great. It's just, I think so long as people are aware of, I'm not here to try and make a buck off the thing. I shouldn't be. I remember seeing a booth at AX one year. They'd never been there before. And they were an art and wood burning, like, wood block burned art. The only problem was they didn't have any original art. They had just taken other people's art, put it on the wood block, and burn traced it. So that year, we were there with the contingent from DF, and Amano was there. Guess whose art they had front and center? And we all looked at this, we're like, it's really good, but what do we do?
Yeah, it's someone else's art. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they had no rights or royalty to it, and they're just at a booth on the floor at AX, where in that same exhibit hall is our booth for Vampire Hunter D, and Dark Horse, who has Amano there as a guest at their booth. So those are not fun situations to have to deal with or get put in. And they didn't last very long. as a company or a group. I mean,
Yeah.
you made some really cool stuff. I looked at it, I'm like, wow, I really like this. You should have maybe gotten the license.
Yep. I remember walking out of I think it was I think it was WonderCon with Red Pyramid's sword. A maker, maybe I can't remember which convention it was, but there was a sword maker, like they made kind of imitation swords. And I know, like, I was there with Square Enix, the attorney from Square Enix, and we were and they had Final Fantasy swords, and so we were there, and he was just like, yeah, you can't. I need to take that sword, and that sword, and this sword, and then I was like, oh, they've got. And he's like, and I need to take that one too. And so we like walked out of there with like 6 swords, and they're like, you can't sell these. We're gonna take them. You got to stop doing this. You can, here's the card. You can, if you want to license it, you need to call. You need to talk to me through official channels. But yeah, so I gave Pyramid Head sword to the big boss Samuel Hadida, and he loved. Oh my gosh, yeah, I think that sword is now somewhere in France.
And
So
on the note of swords, we actually ended up talking with a VHD fan who's a Japanese trained swordsmith, and so he asked, like, hey, at some point, would it be possible to make swords, like actual wieldable swords? And like, I would be totally fine with that at some point. We'd have to do everything that is, dot our I's, cross our T's.
Yep.
But I've seen the guy's work. He won a Forged in Fire competition. Solid blacksmith and swordsmith. And hey, could we do this? That sounds really cool to me. I want one.
Nice.
So I
absolutely
love,
want one.
yeah, I love the degree of engagement that can be possible for both fan creation and fans coming and saying, hey, I have this particular skill set. Could we do an official product? I think both of those are really valid, really great things. One of my friends has worked with Robotech for years, and somebody made this gorgeous giant Veritech miniature with magnets, like whole thing, giant collectible figurine. Sent it to him and said, could I have a licensing deal to make these? They opened the box, take it out, and yes, you can.
Nice.
So it's ideas like that I love seeing, and not all of them go to fruition. Not all of them work out. But if you've been entrusted to, make and shepherd an IP and creation, seeing people express that passion and then share that with you with some of these amazing ideas, to me, that's also really rewarding. Seeing that there are people who are just as much of a fan of this franchise as I am, who would go out in the desert and film in the snow and cold and freeze, because I've done those things for projects. I know what kind of suffering that is. And to see somebody else doing that because they're a fan of something, that, to me, that's wonderful to see. Not the suffering part, but the willingness to have the passion to do the thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, the other cool thing is that if you do reach out like you guys did, you can find like-minded people that do work with those rights, right? So a lot of times people they're like, oh, saying sorry is easier than asking for permission. That doesn't typically work in the film entertainment community. So because then you end up with lawyers, right? But if you reach out ahead of time and there's a real sincere desire to work with the IP holder, many times you're gonna be met with other people that on that end that go, wow, that's a really cool idea. Yeah. And then you get a special waiver or a special permission. and to allow you to do that. And that's where, because then they don't have to protect the IP or the trademark or the copyright. They're giving permission, and it makes it so much easier. And then the people that actually own the rights or work officially with those rights can give permission to the fans, and because many of us are also fans. And I was working with Vampire Hunter D, but I was also a fan before I ever started working at that company. So yeah, it's a wonderful synergy when that happens.
Yeah, to Neal's point, I would like, for people that aren't aware, copyright law requires that you defend it. If you want to maintain your copyright, you have to defend it. So please don't make us have to defend it.
Well, at least that was one thing that we kind of knew early on when it came to that. And that's why we wanted to touch bases originally and be like, hey, we've got this idea. And I think you saw the little clip that we posted and you're like, hey, this is cool, but here's what you can and cannot do. And we just continued to communicate moving forward about well, here's, our plan for it. And they were all within parameters that you had agreed to. And we worked really hard to make sure that even in our vision, we stayed within the parameters of protecting the IP and with what you wanted us to do.
Thank you for listening to Lefty Speaks, the official Vampire Hunter D podcast. Hosted by Brandon Easton, Neal Fischer, and Scott McLean. This podcast is created by Unified Pictures and 9 Realms. Narration by Lauren Evallen-Muller. Recording and editing by 9 Realms. Produced by Scott McLean and Ian E. Muller. Based on the works created by Hideyuki Kikuchi. Happy hunting.